Hello, my name is Alexa, and I'm going to be talking to you today about two mysterious vocalizations within the white-faced capuchin vocal repertoire. The research that I'm presenting to you today is part of a manuscript that we just submitted to AJP. I'll start off by giving you a little context about what gargles and twargles are. A gargle is a low guttural raspy vocalization, and it was temporarily named the horrible noise when it was first discovered by Dr. Susan Perry in 1990, and that might give you an indication of what it sounds like. Twargles are similar, but they incorporate an element of the benign trill vocalization at the beginning. So we consider these vocalizations separately, although they're often used in conjunction. So I'll lay out a scenario in which they might be used. An alpha male might be running down a branch, and then an infant might chase after him, start trilling, twargling, gargling, and displaying some associated behaviors such as wrinkling their face and shaking their head. These vocalizations are generally produced in bouts, and the alpha male may respond in a myriad of ways. He might shove the baby, he might groom the baby, he might just completely ignore it or run away. So it's really variable, and we don't know what the function of these vocalizations are. And so that is the research that I am presenting here today. And I'll also note that although infants are typically seen vocalizing, individuals in all demographic groups have been observed gargling and twargling. And although, again, it's usually at an adult male and perhaps even more commonly at the alpha male, it could be to other individuals as well. Although we don't know about the function of gargles and twargles, we do know a fair bit about some of the other 30 vocalizations in the white-faced capuchin vocal repertoire. Vocalizations may be developed at different periods throughout an individual's life, and actually gargles and twargles are amongst the very first vocalizations that individuals can produce. Most vocalizations that individuals are producing are to broadcast information rather than to elicit information from another individual. And this is really interesting, but it's also really important to study the vocalizations that elicit information because they may play a role in maintaining and regulating social systems, and they could give us some key insights into cultural evolution. But these vocalizations are generally really difficult to study because you need some fine-grained behavioral data. But we are able to study them at the Lomas Barbudal Monkey Project because of a continuous behavioral protocol that has been followed since 1990. One way that individuals may elicit information from other individuals is through Zahavian bond testing. Essentially, this is a reliable yet risky way to elicit information from another individual. But it's really important because individuals can often be incentivized to produce a false signal, or in other words, to lie, because in some situations, it may increase their fitness or their opportunities for reproductive success. One benefit, though, is that when you are producing a risky signal, it's coming at a cost to yourself. And so other individuals in the group are more likely to trust it. Spotted hyenas are known to engage in Zahavian bond testing. They live in fission-fusion groups, and they spend long periods of time apart. And then when they come back together, they need to quickly assess their bonds. What they'll do is they'll expose their genitals, and this is really risky because their genitals could be mutilated. And of course, that would have some serious implications for your reproductive success. White-faced capuchins are also known to engage in Zahavian bond testing. They will hold each other's babies in risky acts of trust. If your baby gets dropped, that's also going to have a serious impact on your fitness. And perhaps more intriguing are these games that they play where they'll stick their fingers or other sharp or dirty objects in each other's eyes, nose, or mouth. And this is actually risky for both parties because you could have your finger bitten off, you could lose your sight, you could get an infection. So how does this all relate to gargles and twargles? Well, we propose that white-faced capuchins use gargles and twargles to assess relationship quality via Zahavian bond testing. And we predict that individuals or individuals whose offspring are at high risk for infanticide will test bonds more frequently to assess their risk of infanticide. So these categories were infants that are less than 8 months old, because infants may be able to start weaning at 8 months. And one of the proposed motivators for infanticide is that female interbirth intervals will decrease when infanticide is committed. And so if an offspring is able to be weaned at about 8 months, then we would predict that infanticide may be less likely to occur. We also predict that pregnant females will assess bonds with individuals more frequently because they have a future risk for infanticide for their offspring. And we also predict that individuals will gargle and twargle more to the alpha male when the alpha male is not the father of the sired offspring, because it would not be in the alpha male's best interest to kill their own baby, although that did happen on one occasion with a particularly volatile alpha male, but it is certainly not the norm. And lastly, individuals will gargle and twargle more to the alpha male than to any other group member, because he's the only known perpetrator of infanticide in the Lomas Barbudal capuchin monkey population. We collected data at the Lomas Barbudal Capuchin Monkey Project, which is located in and around the Lomas Barbudal Biological Reserve in Guanacaste province of Costa Rica. The data was collected over 16 years from 2002 to 2018 on 11 groups of wild, well-habituated capuchin monkeys. There were 357 individuals in total, and over 30,000 hours in which gargles and twargles could have been recorded in the field. We used negative binomial generalized linear mixed models with Akaike information criterion, or binomial tests to assess our predictions. And I'll just say here that we are only presenting our best models in this presentation, which is why you don't see the AIC scores, because they wouldn't be relevant without the context of the other models. So for our first prediction, infants will gargle and twargle at higher rates than the overall population. And in the graph on the left, the red dots are gargle rate per hour, and the blue dots are twargle rate per hour. And infants seem to gargle at higher rates than the rest of the population until they're about 15 months of age. And then for twargles, infants seem to twargle at a higher rate till about 8 months of age. On the right, you will see a table, and that is the IRR, which stands for incident rate ratio, which is just an exponentiated coefficient. 1 would mean that the target and reference group are vocalizing at the same rate. A number higher than 1 would indicate that the target group is vocalizing at a higher rate than the reference group, and a lower number than 1 indicates that the target group is perhaps vocalizing at a lower rate than the reference group. And I'll also note that if the confidence interval, or CI, contains 1, then there might not be a true difference between groups. And I have this key at the bottom of every slide where it's relevant if you forget. As you can see here, infants gargle and twargle much higher than the rest of the population. For our second prediction, pregnant females will gargle and twargle at higher rates than the rest of the adult female population, especially adult females who aren't pregnant and don't have an infant less than 8 months old. We didn't really find any support for this prediction, although there was very weak support when we compared pregnant female gargle and twargle rates to cycling females in the population. For our next prediction, we predicted that females with infants less than 8 months of age would gargle and twargle at higher rates than the rest of the adult female population, especially adult females who aren't pregnant and don't have an infant less than 8 months old. We found strong support for all of these models. For our next prediction, individuals will gargle and twargle more when the alpha male is not the offspring's or fetus's father. We didn't find support for most of the more specific predictions here for most of the models that we tested, except for infants 8 to 23 months old seem to gargle more when the alpha male was not their father versus when the alpha male was their father. And lastly, We tested if individuals will gargle and twargle more to the alpha male than to any other monkey in the group, and we found strong support for this prediction. But I'll note, although it's not presented on the slide, that we did break this question down into smaller demographic groups, and infants less than 8 months old did not gargle more to the alpha male than to any other monkey in the group. However, they still gargled more to the alpha male than to any other one individual in the group. And that was the only demographic group that we found that result for. So, what does this all tell us? Well, individuals seem to be motivated to test bonds to assess infanticide risk, because individuals that we would have predicted were at the highest risk for infanticide were typically vocalizing more than other individuals in the population, and individuals were gargling and twargling much more to the alpha male than to any other group member. However, because of some of our varied results, it also seems that individuals might be testing bonds and using gargles and twargles for other purposes. Perhaps they're assessing coalitionary support, or they're navigating all social relationships, especially when they're at a young age, which might explain why individuals less than 8 months old were not gargling more to the alpha male than to all other members of the group. It's also possible that young individuals just don't understand the function of gargles and twargles yet until they're older, which is why, again, maybe individuals that were less than 8 months of age did not gargle more to the alpha male than to all other group members. It's also possible that infants may be motivated to test bonds with all of the group members because they have the support of their mother when they're younger, and so they can kind of take advantage of this protection and support and test their relationships with all individuals. And then when they're gaining more independence, they might need to hone in on those really important relationships. We also found that a lot of our results varied in gargle and twargle outcome. And so there might be a true difference between the function of the gargle and the twargle, although that is yet to be known. So in conclusion, we found some support for the assessment of infanticide risk hypothesis. Infants gargle and twargle more than the rest of the population, but pregnant females do not seem to gargle and twargle more than other adult females. Females with infants less than 8 months old did gargle and twargle more than other adult females. Infants 8 to 23 months old were the only demographic group, for those that we considered, that gargled more to the alpha male when he was not their father. And lastly, individuals gargled and twargled more to the alpha male than to any other individual in the group. And moving forward, it would be amazing to pair this data with some more specific dyadic behavioral data, although our current data set doesn't allow for that. And with that, I would like to thank all of the funding agencies and the myriad of field assistants, I think it's over 150, who have collected data for this project. Thank you.